I think Islam hates us.
They have done nothing except wreak havoc and terror for our faith and our religion.
When we stand up to those who oppress our communities, that Allah accepts from us that as a form of jihad.
Foundations of society are fragile. We must be the shepherds of our own civilization.
If anyone answers either yes or no without making necessary distinctions, both are not telling the truth. They're lying.
Father, we pray that your word will become a hammer that breaks rocks into pieces. That you will raise up in this nation pulpits and prophets that will call the nation back to repentance.
Will you distance yourself from those who think differently, or will you join us at the table and talk about what is really important? This is the Al-Ma'idah Initiative, conversation without compromise.
So we met at one of my de facto headquarters, which is Armistice Coffee.
Yeah.
And you were reading an Arabic book, and I just gotten back from Egypt, and hearing what you did, I just kind of figured we had to do an episode. So, so for everyone listening, who are you? What do you do?
Well, yeah, first let me tell you that now I'm going to Armistice Cafe after we finish from this recording, so this is a nice coincidence. I am Mona Merhi. I am from Lebanon. I'm pursuing my PhD here at the University of Washington. I'm doing my doctorate studies in theater history, theory, and research. And I'm mostly interested in the theater and performance landscape in the Arab world. I have had my career path is very multi or pluridisciplinary, if I may say. I worked in film production. I had projects to encourage reading in the community, which was it took a couple of years in my life. I had my master's in cultural mediation, so I am more into how culture can affect society in a way, and how can it be engaged politically without going into the slogans or surface ideologies. So yeah, this is me, and it's my second year here in Seattle. Most of the time is within the pandemic times.
Oh yeah, that's terrible.
Yeah.
That is the worst time to have moved here.
Yeah, it was. It was really.
Well, I'm glad that things are opening up and you get to actually experience the city a bit more.
Yeah, to tell you the truth, it's this week is the first week where I discover Seattle physically and really, I only went to the aquarium last year, and this is the only place I visited. But I went to the pier next to Pike's Place. I'm visiting spaces now more than before because I'm more encouraged. After the rates of vaccination here in Seattle, I think are the highest. And it encouraged us to go out, and I have more time, definitely, after I finished all my new projects for my PhD.
So I want to come back more to your experience in Seattle for the very end of the show, because I've noticed from the two of your stories that I've read, you seem to have a pattern of starting off a story exactly in the same location that you end the story.
I forgot to say that I'm a writer, which is the most important thing that I do in my life. This shows how nervous I am but I will manage in a couple of minutes. I write short stories, and I think that the two short stories that you have read, it's a way of relating back to the initial idea, and I relate to spaces a lot. Spaces do affect me, and spaces have their energies on me. In the short story that you have read, it was around us when we were children in Lebanon during the wartime. during the Civil War, and it's about my relationship and like the children's relationship to violence and to religion at the same time, and these are key elements, and like the space where all this happened is a real space. It was like as a church facing our building where we lived, and the building has a fascinating story if we ever have the time to talk about it. The church is a Baptist church, and they used to do a lovely activity which was called the Sunday School. And they would invite all the children of all the neighborhood, regardless of their religion, regardless of their, like, you know, whether they are engaged into like Christianism or not, or they want to engage in it or not. And they would do some activities, and they would make us watch film about the Christ. And it's a kind of a way to like highlight the values of Christianism in a way or another. And for our neighborhood back then, in 1988, before 1988 even, we are speaking of 1985, 86 even, there was this openness that all the parents, whether Muslims, whether Jews, whether Shia, Sunni, they didn't have a problem of their children going to the Sunday school, because for them it's a leisure time for the children, and it's a way to, like, you know, to have for the parents to have free time. And but nevertheless, violence happened, and like there was a little bit of discrimination and racism, but it was unconscious in a way or another. So the story is about that. It's like violence and religion. I wouldn't want to expand more about the story. I would prefer for it when it is like published in Arabic the most, because it is published in English in an anthology. In an anthology called, oh my God, I forgot the name of the anthology. Yeah, it's in an anthology. I will remember the name in a bit, but yeah.
So once you remember the name, it's fine, because we can just like link to where to find it in the sort of description of the video.
Yeah.
So anyone who's watching the show and wants to
I just remembered it. It's The Ordinary Chaos of Being Human. And yeah. So
I've never been to Lebanon, but the story I read about you in Egypt,
yeah,
I could tell was well written, because I went to Egypt about 7 weeks ago, and it felt like Egypt. The way you're describing the streets, the way you're describing how people try and sell you things, and you know, wanting your contact, and we were wanting to kind of have this sort of friendly business relationship. So you've done a good. I know you've done a good job with Egypt. So the description of Lebanon was, you know, very interesting. So without going into the story specifically, so you grew up, so you kind of have this memory of all these cultures kind of living in harmony.
Yes and no, and now I can say no more than yes, because like the layer, the surface of the matter is, in Lebanon, we have 18 sects. This is like a very important factor for the American audience who does not know anything about Lebanon. We have 18 sects, and there is a political system that uses confessionalism to access power, and that plays on on a tension between different sects, different religion. So there is propaganda, There is not only propaganda for political, that there are political parties that are affiliated with confessions. So you have this political party, and this political party has the majority of allegiance of this sect. And you have this other political party. And then when any problem happens, when in terms of politics, what do you think they will do? What they will do is that they will play on the confessional tension between the two opposing sects. And another more important factor in Lebanon is that, like, all these people who want to access power, they also monopolize economy. It's very easy to find this leader of this political party or this prime minister, because like the political elite in Lebanon, all the people who were in charge of the politics and of the body of the state in Lebanon for more than 30 years, they are all people who created their monetary empire, their financial empire. And how did they do so? By abusing the resources of the state and of the country. And so this reflects, if we want to go to the micro level, because you were speaking about harmony, if you want to go back to the harmony thing, there is this kind of course, there are many people from different sects who are harmonious together. But if you want to look at the bigger picture, the harmony is always subject of the threats of the political elite in a way or another. And it's not any more subject of threats. There are people, due to continuous brainwashing, that for them, these tensions really exist, and the other Christian, the other Muslim, the other whatsoever, is a threat to me as an individual. And you would find many people from this range, and there are other people who are totally sectarian or even religious, but they believe that there is a great level of manipulation operated by the political elite who was in charge of the country for more than 40 years. And the only way to get rid of this is is the downfall of the regime. And the regime is very enracinated, as they say in French, enraciné in the body of the state.
So, the Civil War that you grew up during.
Yeah.
What was that Civil War about?
Oh. What was the Civil War about? Okay. And this relates to the idea of harmony that we have spoken about. What incited the Civil War in April 1975, 13th of April 1975, was an incident of Palestinians who were who were part of in Lebanon, being in Lebanon, and they were having their resistance, which is their right according to an agreement that happened in Cairo, and that was that was also addressed by a political leader in Lebanon who was called Kamal Jumblat. So there was this agreement in the Arab world that Palestinians have the right to fight the entity of Israel. And they used to do that through Lebanon. And there is a community in Lebanon who does not want that. But I don't think the civil war happened because only of the existence of Palestinians in Lebanon. I think that the civil war happened because we have a weak entity. We don't have a state. We have political leaders, and we have the bigger manipulation of the bigger power structures, and we are we are one small item within the global politics, and we are being moved according to the benefits of the global politics. And so the civil war happened. If you want to have a historical overview, I think that there are many people better than me that can give you like a picture, a bigger picture. But I think that the civil war for me happened because we did not create a common understanding of the identity of Lebanon. We do have an identity crisis, and this identity crisis existed since the 1860s in Lebanon. And I'm not joking about it. This is my belief. Many people will disagree on that, but we do have an identity crisis, and it reflected greatly when we had the presence of Palestinians in Lebanon. Although for me, back then, they had the total right to fight against the entity of Israel.
So, so kind of what you're saying with the leadership of Lebanon, is that instead of people concerned with the well-being of the nation as a whole, you've got kind of men building their own little kingdoms and empires within the country rather than building something for the whole country.
Yeah, we have something called sectarianism.
Yeah.
And this never went away since I was born. And it would kind of its ratio would be reduced in some years. But now, to the surprise, it's very heightened. It's extremely heightened. And this is where the global politics plays a great role in manipulating us.
Right, because with the sectarianism, there's always a different faction that different parties can try and influence because of what they want to see happen in Lebanon.
Yeah, exactly.
So that and other factors lead to war. And I'm really interested, not so much in the facts here, but what that did to you growing up in war. What was that like?
This is the topic of my short stories collection that I hope will be published in Arabic in the coming year. And I think the war shaped me. It showed me moments where we were very close to death. It made us all, as children, very detached from our emotions in a way or another. And we were like sold rocks. We were part of the violence scene in a way or another. We did things children in other countries would never do. We experienced things children in other countries would never experience, like the fact of not even having a shelter, or like transforming the underground storage space of a building into a shelter, which is not safe, and staying there for 48 hours within continuous bombing and continuous bombing and continuous bombing from whoever political party, and facing close death. So yeah, I mean, there are many memories in my childhood, but the thing is, you create a certain level of survival mode, and the survival mode doesn't go away when the war goes away. We laughed, we played, we were so happy when we didn't have school. And we invented things like children can, to a certain extent, cope with war through their own ways, if I may say. And there are many stories like we were very mean children because everything around us was violent.
Right.
You know, there is a story around that like one of the stories I have written showcases how like mean we were with like an old lady who was really very, very, very meticulous, and she didn't want us to move nor to play, and we didn't have a space to play in. In Lebanon, back then and even now, you don't have parks, you don't have playgrounds, you don't have play areas. You play in your house or in the corridor of the building, which was like, you know, a rectangular space. And she was upset for us playing. And children, when they don't have school and when they have nothing to do, and when you have you and your cousins and the cousins of your cousins fleeing from areas that were like under bombing, to come into our building, then we have to play. We cannot stay silent all the time. So the story showcases how we as children used to kind of find ways to kind of upset her. And there is the story of the name of her husband. So we absorbed the violence, and at the same time we also kind of kept on to a certain level of innocence, and we held on to that. I speak of myself, and I speak of like this utopian world where I try to like indulge myself in. When the bombing was, we spent like hours in the corridors of the building. So you have the seventh level, and it's very dangerous to stay in. So the safest level is the fourth or the third, like the lower levels of the building. So when the bombing was very, very, very high, I used to kind of close my eyes and imagine beautiful things. What I used to do is that I would read in a way or another. We referred as well sometimes to religion, to like the Baptist, the Sunday school was an escape mode for us. It was at a certain moment a utopian mode of being for a couple of hours until we go back to violence again. And this is where we grapple between violence and the utopia of religion. And at a certain age, you decide, hey, this utopia is not true. This utopia cannot do anything to me. I have to escape with my own skin. And this is what happens like in war. And we experienced a lot of displacements. Like my cousins left from their house and came to our building, and then we left from our house, all of us, and went to the mountains. And then the mountains of Lebanon were bombed. So we were in total displacement mode, and nothing else mattered. You know, there are these very innocent childish things in the book that I think that are worth documenting and exploring, because until present moment I'm not sure if the war in Lebanon, the civil war in particular, was documented through the eyes of a child. And I think this is where the book is important for me on the personal level. I'm not sure on like the bigger picture, but yeah.
Sorry, I took a bite of food at the exact wrong time.
I know, no worries. I'm trying to resist eating those.
So that's actually interesting because I'm a couple generations removed from that, but my grandmother had to be evacuated from London because of bombing during the Second World War.
Mm-hmm.
So not in like this generation or my parents' generation of like English literature is that like a huge thing, but in like the 50s that was like a huge theme of like, so have you ever heard of the Chronicles of Narnia?
Mm-hmm.
So the sort of plot, the sort of main characters there are 4 children who are displaced from war, and it's kind of this coming of age story in the midst of that, where they grapple with adult themes and what it means to grow up, what it means to be strong, what it means to fight, what it means to sacrifice. So it is really an interesting theme to explore. So you have this experience of being, living in the face of death every day during the war. And then what was that like for you when that ended? I imagine that's its own set of difficulties.
Well, it was a very awkward moment. The war ended in 1991. I was 11 years old, but it just ended in a very sudden way. And like a couple of years later, after making the aftermath of the war, there was no transitional moment for the communities who were fighting. Because, in Lebanon, what you really need to know, which is very important, is that Beirut, the capital, was divided into the eastern side and the western side. And there was this green line that you could not trespass. And there were what we call massacres happening on the green line, and other massacres happening in villages where Christians would attack Druze and murder Druze, and Druze would murder Christians, and and also in the 1986 and 87 areas, there was within the same sect, Amal and Hezbollah brothers, there was a war called the War of Brothers. We had many wars. We had this civil war and many battles inside, and some wars had their names. So we had the War of Brothers, where people who are alleged with Amal fighting their brothers who moved to Hezbollah, and this was the first years of Hezbollah, and they would brothers killing one another, all of this bloodshed. In 1991, one decision to end the war, and of course, the end of the war happened by the president of today, who is Michel Aoun, fleeing to France, and I don't want to talk about that part, but all that bloodshed, there was no reconciliation taking on. What they did, or the Prime Minister of Lebanon did back then, is that they focused on reconstruction. The downtown of Beirut is demolished. Let's reconstruct it. And reconstruction means nepotism, corruption, because it means growing the empire of the prime minister. So everybody focused on reconstructing the infrastructure of Lebanon, and nobody was attentive to the most important detail is how can you create reconciliation within those within those like tensions between different communities of Lebanon? How can you strengthen your identity? How can you and not strengthen your identity? How can you recognize that you have an identity crisis in the beginning in order to say, hey, we have a problem. Let's work on our identity crisis. And I think until present moment, we did not face the question, and we are living the aftermath of not allowing ourselves to ask it.
Right. So, essentially, there's a very complex human problem at play, and whenever a war ends, you people just treat it like a financial problem. Right. If we just have the right stuff, then life goes on, but it doesn't actually heal the wounds.
Well, I mean, he like, and also you need to know that the region I live in, I come from, which is Lebanon, Palestine, Syria, recently, and all this part of the Mediterranean had always been in a continuous state of exception. So we built a certain, like, shield that is, hey, this too shall pass. This too shall pass. This we are used to this, and like we reach a phase where what is the most important for us is to end the day and have food on the table, being able to educate our children, to make them leave at a certain moment and study abroad or work abroad. So this is the pattern that is continuously repeating itself and repeating itself and repeating itself. Of course, there was an exceptional moment in the history of Lebanon that was one of the exceptional moments, of course. I do not want to kind of romanticize it at the same time, is the moment of the 17th of October 2019. We called it revolution back then. Some people question the term of revolution now. But there was this kind of feeling. There was a unity among a group, a huge amount of Lebanese citizens all over Lebanon who agree that no more. We want the downfall of the regime, and the regime means all of them. And there was this kind of slogan where in Arabic where they say "Killun yani killun." All of them means all of them. Of course, there are like percentages of people who were against this, but I think this was a moment where we witnessed a considerable percentage of the Lebanese system that would trouble the dominating or the hegemony of a certain web of power structures. But then the pandemic took place, and then there were many mistakes happening here and there and here and there and here and there. And we need to be aware that this regime, this political elite, is like kind of extremely challenging to remove, because in a way it's not you do not only have to address them, you also have to deal with the global politics. And I think that the global politics has an interest to keep this corrupt political elite in the system, in the Lebanese system.
Right. So I think often
I'm sorry.
So good. I think often the difficulty is not just removing the regime, but you've got to find something solution to replace it with. Otherwise, that just creates this vacuum, and maybe you remove the first level of leaders, but then the next level of leaders under them are the only people with sort of structural competence, so they come and just do the exact same things we've done before.
Well, when the revolution erupted on the 17th of October, it was my 18th day here in Seattle. So I left Lebanon on the 28th of September. And I cannot assume whether the revolutionary groups, whether they offered solutions or they failed in offering solutions. I'm following up all the time, and like my couple of months, the last couple of months, I reduced. I didn't have enough time to follow up on what's going on, but I don't allow myself to say, "Oh, the revolutionary groups failed. They didn't provide a solution." We also need to be aware of a very, very, very important factors. We inherited as revolutionaries, because I align myself with all those who manifested dissent in Lebanon on the 17th of October. I align myself strongly with them. We cannot forget the fact that we inherited some behavioral patterns in a way from the political elite, which is like the feeling of us being, in a way or another, the only persons who can provide a solution as one group versus the other. So I think there needs to be a lot of work in terms of communicating with one another, in terms of communicating between the different groups, because, from the 17th of October, what stemmed is like huge different groups, and each group maybe has a certain solution for the crisis that we are in. We need to be aware that in order for these different groups to find a common language, it requires a lot of time. And at the same time, the factor of the lack of time is a great challenge. I cannot pretend or say that they didn't provide a solution. I think that there are many solutions offered on the table, but I think there needs to be time in order to find a common language. But the greatest obstacle is time, because time is not always favorable for the groups to find their common language.
Right. So something I kind of hear coming up a lot here is there are the first, once you said the war ended, there was no like reconciliation process.
Yes,
right.
Definitely.
And then you talk about needing to kind of find a way to sort of break from the past, because we're likely to inherit the behaviors of the people who are political elites now, right? So you've got a kind of this renewed identity, and you've got to have this reconciliation. So what's interesting to me is those are almost very religious type terms, but it seems like in Lebanon, religion didn't actually provide any like tangible real world help. It just seems to be this kind of like escapism, right?
Religion complicated the problem. Religion, and I'm speaking politically here. Mm-hmm. I'm not speaking spiritually.
Sure.
I am an agnostic person. And I have many friends who are religious, and many other friends who are agnostic, and many other friends who are atheists. We are not speaking on the spiritual level. We are speaking on the political level. The Hezbollah's leader is a religious figure, and like the ideology, the religious ideology, is a very strong element when it comes to kind of creating the community of Hezbollah. Same thing applies to other parties. Another element is that, I'm going to give you a very small example how religion complicates a problem. The Patriarch of Lebanon. Okay.
So that would be
the Patriarch of Lebanon.
He'd be like Eastern Orthodox Roman Catholic.
the Patriarch of Maronites in Lebanon,
Okay,
let's say. If there is a certain figure that needs to be kind of attacked, or that needs to be following a lawsuit, he would go against that, because he would think that this is an attack to the Maronites. And we have witnessed that many times, and from different religious figures. When we have a huge financial crisis now in Lebanon, okay, and there is the person in charge of the Lebanese official bank, if I may say. I'm not sure if this is the right term in English. He is the individual responsible of that, because he is the one who builds the policy. And only because he is Maronite, the Patriarch was against him being, you know?
Yeah.
Same thing applies to other religions.
Mm-hmm. It's just this tribalism that
Exactly.
you can't touch one of ours even if they've done the wrong thing.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's really rough. But yeah, that is human nature exemplified.
Well, I'm not sure if the path of, I don't know. I'm not sure if this is human nature, because there are many different examples that may show the opposite. I mean, there's nothing coming into my mind now, but I think that there is a pattern, and this pattern was so repetitive and so repetitive and so repetitive in the past years in Lebanon that it's becoming even more and more difficult to break. Although people are still hopeful, there are many people in Lebanon who are still trying and are still fighting this pattern. And I have a total admiration for those people who are still keeping the hope and still fighting, despite the fact, and you need to know that, in Lebanon there is no electricity. If you have a toddler, there's no milk. Sometimes you will not find milk. There are no medications. This is the level of bare life that this system had led its citizens to experience. Okay, there are no medications for cancer patients, not even the simple medication of Advil, which is Panadol in Lebanon. All of this is missing, or they are not being able to provide because of the economic inflation. If you have a newborn baby and you want to create an identity card for him, there are no papers.
Wow.
So this is the model of Venezuela, if you remember what happened in Venezuela. And I think in Lebanon, it's going to be even more challenging, because we don't have resources. What we relied on mostly is the banking sector and tourism.
Yeah.
So.
And no money, instability is bad for both those things. So that completely makes sense to me, why you become agnostic, because basically you have this politicization and tribalism, and people who claim to believe in something that transcends them, right, ends up just using that to support exactly what they want to see in the world.
Well, I don't know. I think that my relation to religion is very complicated. And one of the reasons might be the political environment in Lebanon and how it pushes you against religion and against politics as well. Although everything I talked about is extremely politicized. But I'm going to give you an example. My father didn't allow us to engage in any scout troop when we were children, because scouts were alleged with political parties, and he didn't want us to be part of political parties. But I think, like me being agnostic, the political environment in Lebanon is one of maybe several reasons. And like, yeah.
So I'd like to hear more of those reasons. But so what we do here is we go kind of for 45 minutes, and then we switch to something we call the after show.
Okay.
So we're just going to be right back. If you want to watch in the after show, click on the link in the video, or you can join us next week for another episode. Please like and subscribe for more content every Wednesday. It helps more people see these videos and join in this important conversation. If you want to see more of this conversation, check out the after show right here, or you can watch last week's episode.
This British guy costume is really hot. Can you bring me some water? على فكرة احنا اسمنا المائدة يا اخي، جيبونا اكل حاجة، جيبونا تميز فول يا هو.